Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Hope you had a good break. Able to get a bite to eat or something. Anyway, we're about to begin our third panel. And our third panel is called We Refuse to Be Erased, Labor and the Plight of Immigrants and Indigenous People. And it's facilitated by Lisa Knox with timekeeper David Kyle. Unfortunately, one of our panelists, Yvonne Hines-Balcazar, is now unable to join us. I know Lisa from her work in the Bay Area as an immigration attorney, but if you'd like to say a few words about yourself, Lisa, as well as introducing the other panelists, I will turn it over to you. Thank you, Lisa.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here today. So I want to start out by explaining why we chose this name. We refuse to be erased, labor and the plight of immigrants and Indigenous people. And it's really because, although we won't really touch on it too much today, we wanted to highlight the role of US imperialism in the current campaign of terror against workers and in particular immigrant workers. And as we all know, this is the stolen land that was built by stolen labor and genocide and is reliant on the super exploitation of workers driven to migrate by the impacts of US imperialism abroad. And we also know that migrant workers are at the forefront of a fight, but this fight is against all workers. And we've seen this here in California with the federal occupation of Los Angeles. We've got federal agents that are now racially profiling and snatching workers off the street under the guise of immigration enforcement, but they're also snatching US citizens, right? And this all began with raids on workplaces. One of the things I've been doing in my work in California as an immigrant rights advocate is supporting workers from Ambiance Apparel, which was the first workplace raided in Los Angeles at the beginning of this federal occupation. And of course, while all this is happening, Trump is quietly gutting worker protections. And also, because this conference is about breaking from the two-party system, I do want to start us off by reminding everyone that the Democrats are also complicit. Obama built and Biden expanded the deportation machine that's now been handed over to fascists. And here in California, where many of us on this panel are based, and while you're here about the fight here, we have a Democratic controlled state. It has been that way for the better part of decades. And so I think the fight here really illustrates the need to break from the Democratic Party. And before I introduce the panelists, I did also want to share that we'll be sharing a call to action. We're asking folks to join us in building a tri-national conference that's going to take place in Mexicali this November as a concrete campaign to fight on both sides of the border. Right. So we're extending this call for the creation of a rank and file independent wing within the immigrant rights movement and the labor movement across nations to encompass Mexico and Canada. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But with that, I want to introduce our panelists. We have three really great speakers who will talk about what labor and community are doing to oppose Trump's war on workers and how it's manifested against immigrant and Indigenous workers in particular. So first, we're going to hear from Jay. Jay is an organizer who himself has been impacted by the super exploitation of immigrant labor in detention centers, which we'll hear more about. Then we'll hear from Fatima, who is a labor organizer and immigrant rights advocate dedicated to empowering low-wage workers through grassroots political and labor campaigns, and who's also the secretary of the Sacramento chapter of the Labor Council for Latin American Advancement of the AFL-CIO. And then last but certainly not least, we'll hear from Desiree Rojas, who is a longtime labor and community organizer, currently the president of the Labor Council for Latin American Advancement. And she is also the daughter of Al Rojas and Elena Jamila Rojas, co-founders of the United Farm Workers and full-time organizers of the historic Great Boycott in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And at her father's side, she's carried forward a lifelong commitment to justice through decades of organizing efforts focused on workers' rights, farm worker protections, and the broader fight for immigrant rights. Okay, so with that, I will turn it over to Jay.
Thank you all so much. Well, basically, hello everyone. My name is, I go by Jay just because of the, I am a system impacted activist by the immigration detention centers, and I just want to trying to make sure that I stay within a safe zone. But yeah, I just wanted to share that myself. I have been basically detained in 2 immigration detention centers that are located in the current county. One of the things I could say is that these 2 detention centers are basically for-profit, operated by for-profit corporations, such as GEO. And I would say that I basically was detained for almost 2 years there inside these 2 detention centers. My situation there was that I was basically subjected to have to work for the miserable wage of $1 a day for 8-hour shifts, in which they basically did not provide the adequate training, or basically did not provide the protection while working with dangerous chemicals and any kind of work that basically we were subjected to do. And also just the experience of basically going through the horrible and basically bad, terrible medical care that well, basically just a whole lot of negligence within the medical aspect. So in which, for me and like the countless of people that go through these immigration detention centers, for people who are basically, non-US citizens that are subjected to be occasioned inside these places. Well, we were tired of all this, and we just, we decided that we were, launching labor strikes. We did work stoppages. We did work stoppages. We decided that we're not going to work for GEO, and also we did labor strikes, in which basically we were subjected to be retaliated against by being placed in solitary confinement, and basically being transferred to out of state for the purpose of being force fed, in which basically that's which I would say that that's a violation of our First Amendment right. Even though we're non-US citizens, we still have that amendment right, but these places, they basically violate everything. So so I would say that that's that has continuously, I myself have experienced this, and in which basically I've been in this movement of being an abolitionist of these detention centers, these immigration detention centers, because they shouldn't be in existence. Because we tried everything, all remedies, all basically ways of fighting back against this oppressive system, but yet they continuously just took it upon their GEO took it upon their hands. GEO and ICE took it upon their hands to basically just dehumanize us. And that's why even yet today, I'm released. I was released from an immigration detention center. And so far, I've been, still in the fight, still basically with the mentality to basically close down all these detention centers, in which we have 6 remaining ICE detention centers here in California. I do want to highlight that we have been able to shut down 9 detention centers here in California, so it's not impossible. So I could say that everything that I went through, my whole fight, what I went through inside these immigration detention centers, I want to say that this was under the Biden administration. So all this is being taken place under the Biden administration, and I could say that I was actually transferred from state custody because of a governor that's a Democrat right now. Gavin Newsom basically is someone that he takes pride in basically transferring, double punishing us and sending us to these detention centers, basically. So I could say that, for me, this whole monster, this whole scheme of these for-profit corporations are basically has ties to both parties, whether it's the Republican Party or whether it's Democratic Party. So in this situation, I would say that right now we're currently seeing that there's a threat of a prison basically being reopened in California City. So that I want to say that California City is a state prison that's basically owned by a for-profit corporation that's called Core Civic. And Core Civic is basically doing negotiations with ICE to basically trying to convert it into an immigration detention center, in which right now what we're seeing is that this would be the biggest facility in California that could hold up to 2,000 people, over 2,000 people inside this prison system, which it would be a detention center. So right now we're doing that's the campaigns that we're working on, basically doing pushbacks to basically to stop the expansion of these for-profit corporation ICE detention centers. So, and I want to say it again, it's for-profit, it's all business, it's all basically for the rich there. And I would say that right now, what we're seeing is that they're using the immigrant community as a scapegoat, basically to push their agendas. Their capitalist agendas. So right now, they're basically just demonizing us and basically trying to legitimize that we should be detained. But in reality, is it's for all business. It's all business. It's all to exploit us. It's all to exploit the workers. So that's what my message right here. And I just want to basically thank every single one of y'all. And I would say that it's time for a change. It's time for a basically independent party, basically to make sure that that can basically protect our communities and not basically take not to be bribed or be bought by the capitalist regime. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Jay. Very well said. And as Jay said, right, this is a workers' fight, right? Immigration detention is a workers' issue. And so now I want to bring on Fatima to talk more about the importance of unions and labor solidarity in this fight.
Thank you, Jay. I'll be contributing to our discussion today by examining how much money unions allocate to political spending. I'll also invite us to envision what it could look like if more of that financial spending supported independent rank and file led campaigns, and explore why these grassroots efforts are vital to building real worker power. In the 2016 primary election, Hillary Clinton received a large scale of formal endorsements from major labor unions, despite Bernie Sanders' strong pro-labor record and populist message. This created a noble tension between union leaders and many rank and file members, especially young and more progressive workers. Many union leaders viewed Clinton as a more electable in a general election and known political figure with deep ties to the Democratic Party establishment. Bernie supported unions, living wage, single-payer healthcare, and opposition to trade deals like NAFTA and TPP, which happened to be unpopular with workers. Many felt union leadership had made top-down endorsement without sufficient input from the membership. The 2016 primary highlighted a disconnect between union leadership and the political will of the membership. This led to calls for more democratic endorsement processes like rank and file voting. The total political spending by unions for the 2016 primary election was $108 million and $1.7 billion total on politics and lobbying. A vast majority of union political funds from dues and PACs went to the Clintons' campaign. So what could labor unions have achieved with $1.7 billion if spent on workers instead of establishment candidates? A series national strike funds could dramatically leverage demands to improve the living conditions that we are experiencing right now. It could change the power balance in industries and protect the most vulnerable migrant workers being terrorized, kidnapped, and disappear from their workplace today. Unions can invest in independent worker campaigns that are political or economic initiatives led by rank and file workers or grassroots organizing outside traditional union bureaucracy or major party control. Mass investment in rank and file organizing can redirect electoral money into grassroots organizing, and internal democracy would empower workers. Recent examples of independent campaigns are the Amazon and Starbucks workers unionizing campaigns. Imagine investing in worker-led political and economic campaigns instead of the establishment candidates. Boosting cooperative workplace, mutual aid, legal defense, strike-ready infrastructures, food banks, childcare, community, creating independent labor narratives to counter corporate narratives, a more independent labor movement building long-term worker power outside the two-party system. Unions don't lack money. They lack alignment between how money is spent and what working people actually need. If unions spent even a fraction of what they gave to the established candidate like Hillary Clinton on strike support, shop floor organizing, a bottom-up campaign, we would be looking at a far more powerful and democratic labor movement today. Benefits of independent worker campaigns rebuild trust between union members. grows new leaders from the shop floor, not political insiders, creates real accountability, not just access to politicians, but power, helps diversify the labor movement across race, gender, age, and industry, builds long-term infrastructure for worker power beyond election cycles. A general strike, a mass work stoppage across industries and sectors, is one of the most powerful yet rarest used in the labor movement. Widespread rank and file support and organizing. A general strike can't be declared by leaders alone. It must be driven by mass participation. Workers across unions and industries need to see a common cause: economic justice, immigrant rights, anti-fascist resistance, labor suppression. Be organized at the shop floor level, be willing to take personal risk, job loss, retaliation. No general strike without a general uprising of class conscience. Strong intern union solidarity coordination requires unions across sectors. Solidarity between public and private sector unions is critical. Coordinated messages, strategy, and logistic. Commit to strike funds and mutual support. Historically, general strikes emerge around major repression or economic crisis, authoritarian threat, the rollback of democratic rights, common grievances like austerity, war, or widespread layoffs. General strikes win when they become social strikes, when they move beyond shop floors and start to disrupt the rhythm of everyday life. It's not just about stopping work, it's about stopping business as usual. When schools, transit, housing, immigration rights, and care system get pulled in, the strike becomes a collective refusal that hits the state and capital where it hurts, making it impossible to ignore and too costly to repress. Well, a general strike in the US would require unions to relearn how to strike together, rebuild working class conscience, and openly resist laws that protect capital over labor. We urge union members to create independent caucuses led by the rank and file. An independent caucus in a union is a group of union members who organize within the union, but are not aligned with the union leadership or its formal political structure. These caucuses are usually self-organized, member-led, and aim to influence union policies, priorities, or leadership from a more grassroots or alternative perspective. Key characteristics of independent caucuses: autonomous, operates independently from the union official leadership. Internal composes of union members advocating from within the union. Often push for specific reform, more democratic process, greater transparency, or a different political direction. May run slates for candidates for union leadership or support resolutions. Could form around issues like racial justice, rank and file power, housing, healthcare, immigration rights, and stronger union bargaining contracts. A labor union may have progressive caucuses challenging a leadership they see as too close to management or political parties. Why does it matter? Independent caucuses are a sign of internal democracy and a healthy debate within unions. They often play a crucial role in pushing unions to be more responsive to the need of their rank and file members. Thank you.
So now for our final speaker, we will hear from Desiree Rojas, who's going to say a bit more about how do we build a mass movement, right? What are the next steps to push back against Trump's campaign of terror against workers?
Hello, thank you. Thank you, Lisa. And thank you to everyone on this panel and everyone who is listening. I heard a lot of great comments, and I am very, very moved by a lot of what I heard. In participating on this panel, I heard a very important word, what it means to be an abolitionist. I think that it's important that we all take that stand to be an abolitionist. We all know that Trump right now, President Trump, has written a lot of executive orders, and he's increased billions of dollars into the Immigration Customs Enforcement, known as ICE, deporting many workers international workers, some known as illegals or immigrants, in our nation under an intense violence. History tells us that, especially in California, that today the term or the name of ICE is just another name for what we know that has happened, for what has been happening in our country for many years, especially out of California, New Mexico, and Texas, through agricultural workers. Before ICE, it was a different name. It was the Mexican repatriation that began during the Great Depression in the 1930s. There's an overlapping of time with World War II, where farm workers kept the nation afloat economically with harvesting fruits and vegetables during this war and even after. But there's no celebration in that, because no one in our government wants to really address the issue of cheap labor in this country and the demand of cheap labor that has always been present, and especially for NAFTA and CAFTA and other national policies that have actually been draconian policies that have oppressed workers even more, international workers, especially workers from Mexico. So we like to use the word the original people. We are not illegals. We are indigenous original people that stand on our land. And we do not like the term illegal, because we are not illegals. Nobody is illegal. And even immigrants have protections under the Constitution, which is right now under attack. The reality is that farm workers and farmers and the agricultural system in our country is a national security topic and a discussion that should be discussed by everyone right now, because we're talking about food on the plates in the homes of every family in this country and internationally in the world. There's no doubt that the way that we get out of this is through working class unity. It is important that we begin this inside of our communities. And we do this by understanding who is in our community and who our partners are, and how we can work together in combating all of this, all of these draconian policies, and also all of this violence towards immigrants. Trump has basically given the green light, not basically, he has given the green light to instill fear and terror in our communities. And this has raised a lot of tension. We all know what's going on in Los Angeles. We see many communities organizing to fight back. We see local governments and local representatives fighting back. And those who are, I give them a lot of credit for doing that, and I thank them for doing that. But the truth of the matter is that there are many who are not, when everyone's rights are at stake here. And I want to also say that I am in agreement 100% that the Democratic Party is very complicit in this terror that is taking place. For over 50 years, I know over 40 years myself, along the side with my father, on many campaigns, we have been fighting and trying to reach our representatives to understand the importance of implementing immigration reform, the type of reform that is humane, the type of reform that actually supports workers, not only the workers here in the United States, but international workers. And this has just not been the case. They've used this issue as a bargaining chip for many years to be able to bargain their way out of taking responsibility for farm workers or low-paying workers where there's a demand and cheap labor in this country. That is just not a discussion or a topic that they are prepared or they want to deal with. But today, it's a fact, like it's been mentioned before, under President Obama, who actually President Clinton, who implemented this through NAFTA to begin the process of mass deportations. When President Obama carried it out, he deported over 3 million people. And now today we have Trump, who's implemented a terror and fear agenda against workers. He said he was going after criminals. Today, he's going after everybody, even American citizens. But
thanks for that, Desiree. Sorry to interrupt. I know there's so much we can say on this topic, but I do want to make sure that we have.
I can wrap it up in 10 seconds. Okay.
Thanks.
So my ending point is that as it was mentioned before earlier, independent caucuses are very key inside of the community, whether internally with labor or just flat out in your community, by questioning those hard facts that most don't want to deal with, right? And also to know your universe, meaning your community and who your partners are, and to stay strong that way. And also a message to labor with all the big money. You have the big money, use it. Use it towards protecting workers and human rights. We need to see something stronger out of both nationals in this country who are lacking, who are asleep at the wheel. And as far as I'm concerned, the Democratic Party is belligerent at the wheel, at the driving wheel. And so this is why I've come on to say it is time. It is time to build another party or to organize in that effort. And I want to thank everyone. I'm sorry, there was a point there where I didn't know whether I was on or not, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Desiree. Yeah, and I know the technology, thanks for bearing with this. There can be issues. I do see some questions, so we're going to now move to the Q&A portion. If you have questions, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A. You should see a little option on the bottom of your Zoom screen to type in questions, and we'll try to get through as many as we can. I actually want to start with a question that was posed by one of the other panelists from backstage. And that is, in California, we saw Democrats and aligned NGOs not involve themselves with the issue of Palestine and Gaza. But now California Dems have passed millions for nonprofits to help immigrant groups, and they're showing up to the No ICE protest. How do you think organizers should deal with these groups that want to show up now when there's no political cost, when we know they won't actually deliver for immigrants? Yeah, I mean, I think this is a real issue. You know, some of us, myself included, we work for NGOs. And it is an issue, right, that NGOs are trying to co-opt the political movements in this political moment. So yeah, I mean, I think organizers should not let them get in the way, right? I think NGOs, they're doing service delivery. They're also, I think, trying to co-opt this political moment, but the reality is that we can't let them do that. So, you know, I think just like with Democrats, we need to be very clear, we need to be very unified, and we need to sort of, if we're bringing folks in, right, be very clear about where there needs to be alignment, because I think that is a real risk. And I also want to open it up to our panelists. Do you all have thoughts on that question?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's something that we're seeing and impacting true liberation of the migrant community, as a lot of nonprofits are gatekeepers, and they get a ton of money, and in reality they just block the actual base from building power by going in there and intruding their demands, the nonprofits' demands, instead of listening to the impacted people and allowing them to develop their own demands. So I think like centering impacted folks, whether it be healthcare, immigration, whatever topic. Right now, immigration is a huge it's a huge issue on a national level, and also the momentum of just working families being attacked in this country is so real, from healthcare to housing to education, right? So allowing people who are directly impacted to be the drivers and the centers of the movement is going to be really important.
Thank you, Fatima. Actually, I want to move us to a related question I see in the Q&A from Justin, pointing out that Kamala Harris last year tried to outdo Trump on being tough on immigration, that Kshama Sawant is running for Congress against a Democrat, Adam Smith, who voted to create ICE and has voted to fund ICE ever since. So how do we, recognizing, right, the Democrats and NGOs as sometimes being gatekeepers and preventing this, how do we unite the current protests for resistance against the ICE raids, which could dissipate at any time, with bold independent campaigns and other fights that can take the movement forward long term?
I'd like to answer that. It's really important that the community step out and hold each Democratic committee accountable and start addressing the issues with them, and to say, you don't represent us, and to start holding them accountable that way at their level. The representatives can get away with not having to hear the comments of people, and to start organizing their own community caucuses and start taking the role as their own as a community government. We did this in a similar fashion when we birthed SEIU Local 1000. The members took control and began through a caucus for a democratic union, began to act like the union, and organized inside of California State Employees Association, an association, they were not a union, in order to get to the convention and be prepared enough to vote to incorporate with SEIU, so that we could have our own local union to represent rank and file government state workers, which today is the largest state government union in California, a caucus for a democratic union. That's how we did it. And it's going to take this level of organizing in each district, in each area and community, for people to organize in this fashion, because now in their mind they're saying, we are our government. This is our money. You do not represent us. You don't even include us. The Democratic Party is not inclusive. They're not inclusive of even Democratic voters to attend their local community meetings. So the beginning starts there. And once that mindset is changed, then they have to listen to you, because now they have the majority of voters in that arena and in that area, and they know that the next generation is here. And that's what we need to see. We need to see the next generation of people stepping up and organizing in this fashion.
Yeah, thank you, Desiree. I want to turn to a question I see in the chat. How do you predict AI will affect the building of third parties? I think I want to highlight, like any technology, right? Capitalists are trying to employ AI against workers and against immigrant workers. One of the things we know is happening is that ICE and other federal agencies are using AI to try to track down and detain immigrants, right? So I think we know that, like they always do, right? Any new technology they will try to utilize in the service of exploitation of workers, if we let them. But I also want to open it up. Do others on the panel have thoughts about this question of AI and how it fits into any of this?
I think AI, the most concerning thing is the surveillance, right? Like these programs that now identify like facial recognitions and it's everywhere and they're using people's license plate. How do we have to demand and challenge AI in the sense of like protecting workers and also like trying to use it to create the world that we dream of, right? How if AI can be useful for some things, how do we then transfer that knowledge or that direction to not impact workers as much and use it for our benefit?
I'd like to add something. Well, right now in a bill that is being pushed in Congress, I believe it's Trump's big big beautiful thing that we know is not beautiful. There's language in there. It's a 900-page document, first of all, that we know that most have not read, but we do know that there's a lot of federal money coming out of programs to subsidize more into corporations for more of a corporate welfare for them, or to give more of a tax break to the 1%. But a lot of the protections in place against AI right now, that language is in that bill, is my understanding. And so right now there's a big push about don't weaken AI provisions right now that are in place to slow down this type of corporate progress that they want, that will control, a lot of workers' protections, and to use AI in replace and weakening workers. It's very serious, and it's very serious, especially because of the amount of money that they want to invest in it. So I think it's really important that in everyone's community at the local government level, that they're involved in taking part in the discussion and how to hold those provisions in place so that AI does not deplete our local government budgets. I mean, there's not much we can do at the federal level, but at the local government level, I think is where our power is at.
Can I just add something really quick? I think this is why we are urging unions and rank and files to pressure these leaderships and unions for a general strike, because we have to get ahead of things. And once AI does displace labor, then it is that power dynamic between workers and employers or corporations is going to be even bigger, to where we're losing some of our power by labor shortage stoppage, right? So that's why it's urgent that unions really take a offensive stand and call for a general strike.
I'd like to also add that in California, Senate Bill 7, which bans employers from using AI to make employee discipline and termination decisions, for folks to really pay attention to this. And if this is where your interest is to fight back and to protect workers, and like, what Fatima said earlier, this is a very important place to organize in.
Thank you for that. I want to turn to a question in the chat. Someone pointed out that there have been cases where unions have physically kept ICE from taking immigrants. I guess I kind of want to use this to ask the panelists, what are we saying that's working, right? Are there things right now that people can do in their unions, right, to stop like these kidnappings that are happening? And Jay, I'll start with you if you have thoughts about what is working, like what have people done that's been successful to stop these? I guess I can start us off by saying, in the Bay Area, there have been a few instances where community has physically shown up, and through largely peaceful protest, just by having the numbers, has shut down immigration courts, has shut down immigration offices where ICE is showing up to kidnap community members. So yeah, that has been something that we've seen happening in the Bay Area that has stopped probably dozens of people from being kidnapped by ICE.
I'd like to add, I'm sorry, I thought you called someone out to speak, but I'd like to add some of the things that have been happening that have been very, very proactive is the level of communication through unions, communities, churches, or through people, just neighbors, a community of to know your rights. And of course, a lot of immigration law firms who are on board helping families. I'd like to reiterate that families, these cases vary very widely, and it's very important that families do seek immigration legal assistance. There's been on social media a lot of circulating help from legal assistance to knowing your rights. Our national Labor Council for Latin American Advancement through the legal division of the AFL-CIO, they printed out Know Your Rights information that was disseminated, and that's going on. But I also want to mention about a lot of community people, just people who now are observing that their neighbors are in danger or human rights is at risk, are coming out of their homes for the first time, and they are at rallies, they're marching, they're out dancing in the streets saying, we're not criminals, we're workers, and we love where we live. And we've lived here our whole life, and we believe in this dream of succeeding and to earn an income. And we want what everyone else wants on the other side of the planet, to be able to live and to raise our children and to have a decent life. And so this is not a criminal thing to want. These people are not criminals, they're workers. So you see, communities coming alive in support of one another. And you see labor unions also coming out and defending workers. If you're with your labor union, it's very important that you continue to work with your labor union and bring your voice to the table with any concerns. A lot of the actions that are going on today, whether they're through No King's March, there's other types of these types of actions. People are very concerned about not only their human rights, but they're very concerned about protecting the Constitution. And that resonates with all workers and all people who want what everyone else wants: the right to live, the right to live, and the right to work. And I want to remind everyone. That these are workers. It's taking 10 or 20 people to go to a job site to arrest one janitor, one cook. This is inhumane. So the community and people at these restaurants who are witnessing this are engaging, and they're saying, wait a minute, this is wrong, right? And so that's what I'd like to add.
Thank you. I see Millie appearing, and that may mean our time has come to an end.
Yeah, thank you. We're actually are over time for this panel, but it was a wonderful panel, and thank you so much for all your contributions to it. I'd like to introduce the next panel, however, and I think this is, I'm sure our fourth and final panel, and I'm sure it'll be just as good. And that's the Black liberation and the fight for independent politics. It'll be facilitated by Kaimon Freeman with timekeeper Fatima Garcia. And unfortunately, one of our planned speakers, Connie White, who's a long-term activist in the Los Angeles Black community, who was a local leader of the Labor Party in the 1990s and has remained active through LSIP and other organizations since, is unable to join us due to health issues. And that's really unfortunate because she's a wonderful speaker. I can vouch for that. However, we do have two other wonderful speakers and a facilitator. So Kaimon, if you would provide introductions for the panelists, but also say a few words of introduction about yourself as well. Would appreciate that. And I'll turn it over to Kaimon. Welcome.
Peace and blessings, world. I'm gonna see if I'm can you hear me, guys? Thumbs up. Okay. It's Kaimon Freeman, Angry Black Man in Therapy, co-founder of We Act Radio here in Washington, D.C., brick and mortar studio on the radical side of Martin King Avenue. Also, two-time candidate for D.C. delegate here. I ran for Congress last year. I'll be running again this year. I got more votes than Donald Trump got in Washington, D.C., so I'm very proud of that. I'm very sorry to hear about Connie White's health issues, so I'm going to include her bio when I introduce everyone. But let me start by saying that we all very familiar with Martin Luther King's last speech, but we're not may not be as familiar with his next to his last speech, which was delivered right here in Washington, D.C., March 31st, 1968. The title of this speech was Remaining Awake During a Great Revolution. He goes on to say in that speech that far too often people find themselves living in periods of great social change, but yet they fail to develop the new ideas, the new mental responses that the new situation demands. They end up sleeping through a revolution. I submit to you that's the quintessential definition of stay woke, and that is why our enemies have turned it into a pejorative. All right. Having said that, let me introduce the panel that will be joining us here today. We have Brother Khalid Rahim. He's a community activist, organizer, and author. He's the founder and chairman of the New African Independence Party, and also served as the national co-chair for the National Black Radical Political Congress. Additionally, he's a veteran and former member of the Black Panther Party. Thank you for your service, sir. Gus Griffin is a member of the Ujima People's Progress Party here in the state of Maryland. Wow, it's the only Black-led working class political party in Maryland. Wow. And he has been a political activist and organizer as well as an educator for 25 years in the DMV. He is currently a member of the Black Alliance for Peace, Faculty for Justice in Palestine, and a graduate student at Morgan State University for History. And in the absence of Connie White, she has been a Labor Party advocate and a political organizer nationally and internationally for 3 decades. She's a political analyst, theorist, and organizer, and was a delegate in 1996 to the founding convention of the Labor Party USA, in addition to being an organizer of the Afrikan Tribunal that took place at Compton College in 2000 that brought together activists from all over the African diaspora. Connie has a long history of advocating for independent working class politics, and we hope that she has a speedy recovery and many more years of healthy contributions to our struggle. Having said that, I believe in the African tradition, we'll ask for permission for our elders to speak. So we will start with Brother Khalid Rahim.
All right, so we'll take it from there. And we do have permission to speak. And you've spoken so far very, very well. I think the assumption is that I'm the elder, but don't forget about Brother Gus. He might be in the running. So what I'd like to do is to, first of all, pose some very fundamental strategic questions. And these are questions that I believe will determine the type and degree of relationships between labor and the national Black community, not necessarily your local communities, but I think it will shape and inform how you should relate to your local communities as well. And the national Black community, as we all know, is composed of the working class, as well as the petty bourgeoisie, the lumpen, as we call it, the lumpen proletariat. In a national Black bourgeoisie, this is not the 1950s or the 1960s. We now have a national Black bourgeoisie, which also consists of embedded political Blackness leadership. So I think that's one of the fundamental questions that we need to ask ourselves. And we need to ask ourselves, what is Black liberation? What should it look like? Is it basically protecting and expanding DEI, or should it consist of moving towards creating a socialist America? Or should it result as an independent or semi-autonomous Black independent state? So these are some fundamental questions. Are Black people an internal colony of the United States, or just another exploited segment of the US working class? Should its focus be protecting civil rights or pursuing the development of an anti-colonial movement with the goal of self-determination? Some basic tactical challenges, or they could be strategic challenges, would involve the political culture within the national Black community, and you see it exemplified locally as well. A lot of it has to do with the history of the civil rights movement, which I would argue was an anti-colonial movement. We called it civil rights, but it was an anti-colonial movement, and some people may disagree. But it has a lot to do with the impact of the civil rights movement on the political culture that currently exists within the Black community. Black people have been taught to believe that we have a debt to the Democratic Party and to the Democratic Party establishment. And we have been socialized, we have been educated and encouraged to basically vote straight Democrat, no matter what the situation is. That to not vote for the Democratic Party is somehow or another an act of disrespect to our ancestors, or an act of disrespect to the organizations and movements that fought for Black people's right to vote, for Black people's right to run for office, and for more engaged Black voter participation. So that is part of the problem. It didn't just start with the civil rights movement. It kind of goes back to the New Deal era as well, but beginning around that period. So we have this political culture within our community that is very difficult to push back against, because it's reinforced through our religious institutions, is reinforced through our popular culture, the different entertainers that many of us look up to, that we follow. So it's almost gospel, for example, that you have to vote Democrat or straight Democrat. Slowly but surely, things are changing, but it continues to be an uphill battle. So we also have to deal with what I call the neo-colonial structures and the institutions that exist within the community. And I mentioned just a few of them. I talked about, for example, some of our religious institutions, not all of them, but many of them. And then a lot of our cultural institutions, not all, but many. Another challenge for us in terms of dealing with electoral politics as a tool within the toolbox to advance some notion of Black liberation. Another major challenge is campaign financing, that we have to deal with the likes of all types of lobbies and all types of lobbyists. We have to deal with folks who lobby on behalf of Israel, AIPAC, but it's not just AIPAC. We have to deal with a whole bunch of people who lobby the so-called political representatives to not represent our interests. So these are some of the challenges that I wanted to talk about, that I wanted to point out, and hopefully some of these challenges and some of the discussion can generate some ideas about how to best move forward. I think basically and fundamentally, we need to answer that fundamental question strategically, because it will determine the type and degree of relationships between the national Black community and the overall labor movement. Are we just another segment of the US working class? Should we be dealt with as such? How should we be moving forward? And I'm open.
All right. Thank you for having me, everyone. I guess I want to start with, and thank you for the comments from my big brother and comrade, Khalid Rahim. I guess where I want to start at is what does independent Black politics look like? Because that's really what it comes down to. And when we can talk about it on a theoretical level, which is necessary, ideological level, which is, of course, is necessary. But on the ground, what does it look like? And I would propose to you that the Ujima People's Progress Party, of which I'm a member, is trying to formulate that for something tangible, something that people can actually look at on a local level. As it's been stated earlier in this conference, we can do a lot. We can, we can put forth efforts on the federal level, state levels, the larger levels, the higher levels, so to speak. But at the end of the day, most of the progress is going to come from the ground level, because we want to move it from the ground up. We've seen that the top-down piece simply does not work in terms of working class and Black people. So I would like to start there. What does independent Black politics look like? And in terms of the Ujima People's Progress Party, I want to start there because I think that oftentimes whether it's asked out loud or thought privately, people wonder within our left radical movements, why a specific Black party? Why a specific Black party? Well, I would simply answer that by saying, if we were thinking about that coal mine that we know is toxic, we wouldn't ask why the Canaries take special provisions for canaries. That's what their situation is. Their situation is unique. They're at the tip of the spear of the oppression, and therefore they take special provisions for themselves. And that's how we think of the need for a Black worker-led party. It doesn't mean we're exclusive. It simply means that we see ourselves in a situation that is unique from the larger group. I want to talk about primarily some of the work we're doing right now. We are a small party, as I'm sure most of you know. Our primary project right now has to do with housing. We're doing a lot of work. Shout out to brother Roger Evans, leading a lot of our work on housing. We work with the Baltimore Renters United on working to organize housing residents. Why housing? Well, one of the reasons why Mondano was so successful so far in New York is because he focused on issues that direct people's daily lives. And in terms of housing, there's a lot of notice that 25 to 33% should be the most you're spending on your housing. Some people say 25, some people say 33. That's the most you should be spending on your housing. And there's I know a journalist friend of mine, a very good journalist, who says that he's from New York, born in New York, raised in New York, loves New York, but he won't live there. Not because he didn't want to, but because he'd be spending over 50% of his income on housing. All right. And that's just not viable. And so we want to work on housing, and we think that's a perfect place to start because that impacts everyone. Everyone. There's no selectivity in that. Everyone is impacted by housing and housing costs. When we find success with housing, then we want to expand it to other areas, such as schools, such as healthcare, such as childcare, worker co-ops, things of that nature. Policing. I just returned recently from a trip to Colombia, and we visited the historical city of the historical settlement of Palenque. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. It is the first free settlement in the Americas, 1603. And so one thing I noticed is that when they were taking us on our tour is that they have a community policing unit. Now they do have a jail, okay? But for the worst case scenarios, a person might go in jail for a night or two, okay? So basically, and they don't carry weapons. So basically there are models for a better way to do this, and they exist all around the world. And to some degree, there's some models that are even getting off the ground here in the United States. So we want to emulate those things. But until we create those concrete models, it's going to be very difficult to pry folks away from the Democratic Party. All right. So there are two factors that we see that are obstacles for our building capacity, which I'm going to talk about briefly. And one is, of course, the obsession, as was mentioned earlier, and my brother mentioned it earlier, about how we've been just bombarded with the lesser of the two evils, with the Democrat or Republican. In fact, if you critique the Democratic Party too much as a Black person, you're suspected of being a closet Republican. That's how little imagination that we have. And so our political education effort is critical to building capacity, which is the next area where we got to be able to build capacity, because we simply don't have enough bodies to do the work that needs to be done. So building capacity is going to be dependent on that, the political education piece, but it's also going to be dependent on, ironically enough, the duopoly will help us in this. The more that our material conditions are decreased and the living situation is decreased, the more that others will start looking for alternatives. Okay, as long as the Democrat and Republican duopoly, as long as they keep failing, and they will keep failing, there's no indication they're going to change, then we're going to get more of an opportunity. So it's up to us to build these independent parties, to build these alternatives, to be able to appeal to the masses of the people. And we can do that. And we're doing that right now. Some of the challenges, I would say, in terms of that political education, I would say, obviously, I think we've talked about the ballot access piece, and that's intentional to keep us off the ballot. And the Green Party can speak to it better than we can, in that they're larger. But they simply don't want any competition. As much as people talk about free competition, they really don't want it. The other challenge I think is very important is to get the mindset away from individual assessment towards systemic assessment. Donald Trump is bad. I don't think anybody's going to argue that. We get that, okay? But surely, I think also most people, at least in this audience, understand that if Donald Trump ceased to exist, J.D. Vance would just step in and materially, in terms of policy, I don't think anything would dramatically change. So I think it's important to be able to be ready to make that point when we talk to people, because otherwise they're just going to stay on Donald Trump, and I think that's counterproductive. In terms of our next steps, we talked about political education. We're going to talk about the role of the duopoly. There's a lot of hope in Baltimore, which is our primary base, is predominantly Black. In Prince George's County, where I'm at, is also predominantly Black. And neither one of them show anything different for Black people in terms of political empowerment and in terms of moving forward. And so when we have that situation, we understand that we can make clearly the point that merely identification isn't going to do it. Merely Black faces in high places, that simply isn't going to do it. We need people who are speaking on behalf of the people, for upward movement instead of downward movement.
We're over time. I'm sorry.
Oh, wow. Overtime? Okay. All right. Now just
Thank you, brother Gus. We will be coming right back to you shortly. Don't go nowhere.
okay.
As you pointed out, Black people overwhelmingly have been supporting the Democratic Party since LBJ, and many people on at this conference, white and Black, probably even voted for Barack Obama. So we, in our effort to break the two-party system, I must quote the hypocrite Bernie Sanders when he says that the Democrats are just as complicit, and our two-party political system is corrupt. All right. And having said that, Brother Nnamdi Lumumba, I believe, said earlier that our election should be used to disrupt this status quo. Well, I think we just seen a successful insurgent campaign with Zoran Kwame Madami and his working class politics, because clearly when you have $25 million and the former mayor and the former president of the United States and even the head of the Congressional Black Caucus gets dusted off and couldn't get a former 3 times governor elected over a Muslim immigrant in the largest city in America, that has been a clear repudiation of the Democratic establishment. So much so that we have gone from third-party candidates being pushed off the ballot, as you pointed out, Gus, by the Democratic establishment, to failed Democratic candidates running in a general election as third-party candidates. Under the headlines of the corporate media saying socialism versus capitalism. I think Stokely Carmichael, also known as Kwame Ture, is probably smiling somewhere. Having said all that, what do you think we can glean? What lessons can we glean from this success, and what does this mean now for Black liberation and the fight for independent politics? We can go back to Brother Khalid if you have ready for a response, or Gus if you're ready for a response.
Sure.
The floor is open.
Yeah, so I think we should be cautiously optimistic. I think what this represents is an example of what could be if we organize and work hard at organizing, and if we're able to pull the people into the organizing initiative and understand. I think someone had quoted, I think the quote was made by Jill Stein, but I think the person who made the original comment was not Dr. King or Malcolm X. I think it was Stokely Carmichael when he pointed out that we're just not organized right. Right? It's not a question of numbers, it's a question of organization. And so Black folks, for example, we represent a population 45 to 50 million strong. We're no longer the 4 million slaves newly liberated, just walking off the plantation. We're a very powerful force here within the United States of America politically. And if we ever were to aspire for self-determination, we would be a very powerful force globally as well. But let's talk about the whole thing that happened up in New York. Again, I'm cautiously optimistic. We've been down this road before. We've seen those types of success stories in the past. And I think what it has done in the long run, not only was it disappointment, but it provided cover for like aspiring Democrats and even for members of the Democratic Party establishment to capitalize on that momentum and that energy right, to capture that vibe and that type of momentum, and to basically hijack the energy from that particular movement or those movements at that time, so they could pursue their own long-term agenda. So we have a tendency to be too optimistic and too hopeful. And I think we need to be very cautionary, and we need to look at the good things that came from this particular campaign, but not get our hopes up too high. And we need to continue to be as strategic as possible in terms of radical independent politics. Not politics aligned to the Democratic Party, because even though you call yourself a Democratic Socialist, you still had to use the Democratic Party's ballot line to do what you had to do. And that's okay, right, for the time being. But I think we need to be aspiring and looking for something much higher, much deeper, much more radical.
I think the talk around the campfire is that this is civil war within inside the Democratic Party, and that if there's that such turmoil inside the Democratic Party, how can we best benefit it as independent parties? But we also have to acknowledge that, as I alluded in my question, that we've seen Democratic candidates run to utilize the third party candidacy to further their individual means. So it's getting a little complicated and a little messy. Gus, your comments.
The only thing I would add is that in addition to what my brother colleague said, is that we have seen this before. I think we should take note of his agenda, what he ran on. I think that's a validation of our agenda in many ways. But I also say we've seen this before. There was a lot of excitement in Chicago, and didn't quite work out that way. Cleveland didn't quite work out that way. Other than our brother Charles Barron of the Power group in New York, I don't know of any that have done this under the Democratic banner and truly been independent. And so optimistic, yes. And, it's a wait and see thing. We should glean as much as we can and go from there.
We have a question online from Brother Abdul Beckwith in Michigan, especially Detroit. There's a lot of gatekeeping when it comes to the Black vote. Most are under the influence of the Black church and Black bourgeoisie, when in turn makes them blindly fall in line with the Dems. What actions would you take to not just help the people download the propaganda, but to ensure the people do not fall for the same divide and conquer strategies? As a congressional candidate in DC last year and a future candidate next year, I would say to that we just have to run on policies. I think it was Elijah Muhammad said, you just put up a clean glass of water next to the tainted glass of water and you let the people choose. There's nothing the Democratic Party has delivered to Black people beyond symbolism. So we just need to run on those policies that will address the bread and butter issues of our people. And I think they would be able to make intelligent choices from there. Clearly, what I'm gleaning from this election is that you can have all the money in the world, but it doesn't change the price of tea of China or the price of the bagel in the bodega in New York. I'll give it to my elders on their response to that question from Brother Abdul in Detroit.
I think he's on point. I think most importantly, and to kind of utilize the example that you offered, you referenced Elijah Muhammad, the clean glass and the dirty glass. I'm quite familiar with that, but you got to provide a glass, and the glass has to be filled with something. And unfortunately, throughout the radical revolutionary Black community's ranks, we have failed to provide a glass up until recently. Many of us shied away from utilizing electoral politics as a toolbox to advance Black liberation. We thought it was bourgeois. We thought it was counter-revolutionary. We thought it had no significance. And I have to admit, I'm one of those people who fell in that camp, right? From several decades ago. We thought revolution was just around the corner. As a matter of fact, we believed in armed struggle, and we were very serious about it. So as people who believed in armed struggle and who thought the revolution, the fulfillment of it was just around the bend, we had no time to consider utilizing electoral politics at all. That was an error. That was an error in thinking. It was an error in action. And many of us recognize that today. So we have to provide an alternative to our people. We cannot chastise our people and criticize our people if they continue to vote straight Democrat when we haven't provided or tried to create any type of alternative vehicle. We have to create Ujima People's Progress Party. We have to create New African Independence Party. And then we have to make it popular. We have to organize it. We have to spread it. And then we could talk about some principal criticism for those people who continue to hold on to the Democratic Party bureaucracy.
Brother Gus?
I would only add that, you know, it's political education, and it's pointing to the contradictions and, you know, the unmet promises. And there's a point where, you know, for those of you at a certain age, you might remember the Charlie Brown skit where he tries to kick the ball and Lucy always pulls it away. And we're at the point in history politically with the Democratic Party where we should be asking ourselves, why do we think that they're not going to just pull the ball away again? I mean, they've done it over and over and over again. And the definition of insanity is to do the same thing and expect different results. And so I think when we talk to people, and I don't mean talk down to people, we got to talk to people where they're at, where we're at, because we're working class people and we understand where we're at. But I think when we talk to people about how unmet needs are being continue to go unmet, generation after generation, the minimum wage stays where it's at in terms of buying power, has even decreased. And when we talk to people on that level, they understand. They don't need to be political science majors to understand. They don't even need a college degree. They understand their daily struggle. And those material deteriorating conditions are going to be our best ally in bringing people around through breaking that duopoly.
I'm here in Washington, D.C. We have the largest populations of Ethiopians outside of Ethiopia. And one of the Ethiopian proverbs I've learned says that when the great Lord passes, the wise peasant bows deeply and farts silently. I think that is what we have been doing when we come in contact with people of power in the Democratic Party that's been put before us. And I think that we're starting to probably fart a little louder because we're now in a space where you cannot continue to give us benign neglect promises. That's what I think I'm gleaning from this past election, because we see the entire, not only the Republican right wing, but the Democratic establishment and the corporate media convalescing around oppressing this young man. You know, the New York Times even came out, and then I think everyone's showing their teeth. Billionaires have come out and said that we need to put our money behind a moderate. We need to find someone, you know. So how do we, because here in DC, we have the oldest member of Congress, Eleanor Holmes Norton. That's who I run against. The talk is, why has it been a failure of our iconic figures to mentor and pass the torch of the baton to a younger generation so they can prepare that leadership to be to take the next lap? This is an open question to both of you, because in order for us to have a vibrant third party, we need to take the success lessons that we've seen from campaigns like Zoran, where he got masses of young people involved, and it got around a young candidate about bread and butter issues, rather than simply talking about what's, the ideology. They was actually basic issues. People was able to repeat the three things he ran on, and it was beat over their head. And I'm not even in New York. What can we glean from that to apply to now as we go forward? Because I think some of these problems are within us because of our own doing.
I think that's an excellent point. And I do think that we need to focus on the bread and butter issues, as you call them. I think about my own political development, 10-point platform and program of the Black Panther Party, bread and butter issues, right? Relevant then, still relevant today. The other thing is, as we focus on the bread and butter issues, we should not lose sight of what the long-term goals and objectives are. That's one of the reasons when I started out, I posed those serious strategic questions for the labor movement in terms of our relationship to the labor movement overall, not us forming some type of alliance today and working on your campaign or somebody else's campaign next week and utilizing the same type of style that was utilized up in New York or focusing on bread and butter issues. What is the end game? And so what I'm saying is that for the 45 to 50 million Black folks here within the United States of America, as it is presently, constituted, that we need to have a different version of what the end game is going to look like. That the version that we had embraced from 40, 50 years ago, or 60, 70 years ago, during the civil rights movement, civil rights era, even during the early stages of the Black Power movement, doesn't matter anymore. We have exhausted that playbook. So we need to come up with something profoundly different that is going to prepare our people for the real future, not a future of continued codependency, but a future of genuine freedom and liberation. We need to look at those type of options, those type of alternatives. And it might very well be, right, an autonomous Black nation or a completely independent Black nation, right? But again, we're going to have to make those hard choices, have those serious discussions, and make those serious decisions strategically and tactically. And if we're going to have any type of workable coalition with the labor movement, then Black workers are going to perhaps need to be recognized as more than just workers within the American workforce and be looked upon as something different and something unique. So that's where I'm at.
Brother Gus, you got to respond to that. If not, we have a question from Brother Nnamdi Lumumba.
Go to the questions.
Okay, just a second here, sir. Shout out to Nnamdi Lumumba. Where'd your question go? I saw it pass across the screen, but I don't see it in the Q&A listed. Can someone share me Brother Nnamdi question? I see you, Nnamdi. You're in the chat, Nnamdi. How does building independent Black political power help or hamper the overall working class movement in the United States? I give it to you one more time. How does building independent Black political power help or hamper the overall working class movement in the United States? Open floor, gentlemen.
Brother Gus, you want to jump on it first?
Sure, I'll go. I think the working class movement has segments, all working class, but it's under an umbrella. And I think, as I alluded to earlier, I see us as a kind of sort of canaries in the coal mine on this whole thing. And I think as you build up on those elements, then it also encourages other elements to emulate and to build up as well. Again, it's a bottom-up process rather than a top-down process. And I think that's going to encourage others to it gives hope to others to do some of the same things. And it's an interchangeable thing. We learn from others, others learn from us. For example, we have coming up in our next political education session is going to be on how we can protect our immigrant brothers and sisters. And I say that to say this, to push back on a common narrative out there that unfortunately a lot of Black folks have about, let's sit this one out, whether it's on immigrants, whether it's on Gaza, whether it's on LGBT, whatever the issue is. And we push back on that completely and authoritatively. And so I think when we show solidarity with others, we also reinforce ourselves. And I think that's the way to go. And I think that's going to be very successful.
I agree 100%. I think that the labor movement can benefit from the energy and from the numbers that a robust, active, engaged Black liberation movement can bring. I think we all can learn from one another. We all can teach something to one another. I think that our struggles from the 1950s and 60s and the early 70s, for example, which I characterize as anti-colonial struggles, we were engaged in an anti-colonial movement and struggle against apartheid, US-style apartheid. The enemy was Jim Crow. And so, as we often say within the NAIP, the individuals make the organization, but it's the organizations that make up a movement. And so our anti-colonial movement was comprised of various groups of organizations, from Montgomery CP to so forth and so on. And then our second phase was the Black Power movement, which saw some elected officials start to take office and more Black political, activism and engagement. In the final stage, which was the most dangerous stage to the US government and the most dangerous stage to the US empire, was the Black Liberation Movement, which was characterized by groups such as the Black Panther Party, the Republican of Africa, certain segments within the Nation of Islam, the Congress of African People. Those were the powerhouse groups of organizations that really were threatening to the United States and threatening to the US empire. And we were in alliance with various other formations, the anti-war movement during that time, the Brown Berets, the Young Lords, the Young Patriots. So we were all working together in alliance to do whatever we could to transform American society, perhaps to liberate and free some of what we believe to be the internal colonies, but also to make it a better place and a better world for everybody. And it was an international struggle on top of all of that. So can the labor movement benefit from that type of energy? Yes, it can. Can the Black liberation movement benefit from the energy coming from unions and workers? Yes. But the working class here within the United States, which is predominantly white, has to ask itself, is it willing to walk away from white supremacy? And not just walk away from the philosophy and walk away from the ideology, of white supremacy, but can it walk away from the tangible material benefits that white supremacy offers? Is it strong enough? Is it willing enough? Is the leadership strong enough and courageous enough to do that? And I would say that at this point, the leadership isn't. Perhaps the rank and file is, but the leadership is thoroughly racist and thoroughly corrupt. So those are some of the fundamental questions that I asked from the very beginning, because those are the type of questions that will determine what kind of political relationships we have in the future. And we can still deal with the bread and still deal with the butter issues too, but we got to come back to those basic questions that must be answered.
All right. Again, Brother Khalid Rahim, thank you again for your service. Folks in their elected office oftentimes are having to capitulate to corporate interests or mainstream political interests in order to secure the finances and get into the networks to get them elected, while delivering only for the most part symbolic victories to the masses of low-income folks in this city. And until folks are clear about undermining the way in which the corporate sector is essentially able to curate folks that come before our community, that become elected officials in a still majority Black city, until folks are willing to come to grips with that, we are essentially rearranging the chairs on the Titanic. That's an excerpt from one of my hearings here at DC Council, and we under Black leadership here. But whether it's the Democratic Party or the third parties, we need to be cognizant of who is putting these people before us, because we just see that the current mayor of New York is running as a third party. Status Quo is going to run as a third party. So we need to be cognizant of those things. And mind you, Status Quo was endorsed by the majority of the unions in New York. So when we talk about what we're going to do for working class, so these are things that need to be unpacked. And I know we're running out of time. I'm going to give an opportunity. Do we have any more questions? I didn't want to make sure I didn't miss anybody.
So it's not about third party, it's about radical revolutionary politics and radical revolutionary candidates and campaigns. So you could be a third party, you could be a third party that supports imperialism and capitalism, right? You could be a third party that supports fascism. But we want you to be a radical revolutionary party that's going to represent the Black poor, the Black working class, the white working class, the white poor, the brown poor. We want you to be that type of political party, running that type of political campaign, fielding that type of political candidate. You could be third, fourth, or fifth. It don't make no damn difference. But you got to be radical and you got to be revolutionary, anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, basic and fundamental.
We got two more questions. This is from Linda Thompson, who's the reason why I'm here. Thank you again, Miss Linda. She says the Black community has been noticeably absent from the No Kings demonstrations. Could you comment on that? Wanda Sykes advised the Black community to sit them out, and others have said to avoid victimization. Could you comment?
Quickly. I think that's crazy. I disagree with it. I disagree with that type of position, but I understand that position. A lot of Black people are fearful that our presence in any mass protests and demonstrations might signal a political card for Trump to play the National Guard card, right? Like it's riot, it's civil unrest. So we're going to institute martial law type of card. So that's part of what's going on. We know that when it comes to history, anytime Black people get in it, whether we're getting in it to help somebody else or we're getting in it because it's our thing, we're going to be subject to the first bullet, the first beat down, and the first wave of incarceration. Again, history should always be instructive, right? Not just celebratory. So we talked about fascism. The Black Panther Party in 1969 declared that the U.S. was a fascist state and helped to organize the first national committees to combat fascism. Why? Because all across this country at that particular time, the anti-war protesters, the Black Panthers, the Brown Berets, the Young Lords, the Young Patriots were getting vamped on by the police in collusion with the state attorney generals, in collusion with the U.S. Justice Department. Officers were being raided early in the morning, 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. People get murdered. You heard about Fred Hampton and Mark Clark. That was happening all across the country. In the Black Panther Party, we were getting raided literally every 2 weeks. So it was a call to bring people, to bring all those forces together, right? That's my point, okay,
Well,
is that we talk about radical politics. It must be radical and revolutionary to the core. You have to be strategic. You have to be tactical. We get that, right? But we can't keep pushing the same type of button thinking we're going to get a different result.
all right, I want to bring Gus in for that response, but because we got one more question to get to. I understand your concern, Brother Khalid, but I don't know if that is for the majority of the people that was out, that's may have been out for the No Kings, because Lord knows everybody was outside for George Floyd. But I could say this, that when Bernie Sanders and AOC was doing their national tour, I saw them at Coachella. I saw them in Idaho. But I didn't see them in New York City. I didn't see them in DC. I didn't see them in Chicago or Detroit. So that same smoke should be given to our so-called progressives who are not targeting Black communities, because we seem to be always left behind in the colored section. Brother Gus?
Oh, just briefly, I think it's back to political education again. When we think of these ICE agents running around here now, terrorizing the immigrant populations, they're trained in the same place as a lot of these police officers, and they go to Zionist Israel. All right, so that's how we connect these dots. That this issue, what's going on in Gaza, affects what goes on here. What goes on in these immigrant communities affect what goes on in Black communities. Because if you don't think they're coming for us next, you just aren't paying attention.
That's right. That's right. I agree 100%.
We got another question, and but we all here supporting solidarity, to answer Ms. Linda Thompson's question, and most of us are in agreement that we're not here to sit the revolution out. William Chandler says, how do we convince sisters and brothers that we must stand in solidarity with other poor working class people? Some of them are speaking from a position where other non-African people have zero empathy for African people, whether it's police violence, reparations, medical, etc. I understand their frustration, but we've seen instances where Comrade Fred Hampton and others were able to create the Rainbow Coalition. Yes, he created the true Rainbow Coalition that was hijacked by Jesse Jackson. How do we get back towards that a true Rainbow Coalition? I think we have, for the most part, some, don't let social media distract you, because someone else is manipulating those algorithms on what you see and what you don't see. So that's not an accurate litmus test. We have to put that out there. But when I'm in the streets, and when I'm saying that, for the most part, has been a lot of rainbow solidarity, from George Floyd to our local issues here. So I give it back to you, brothers, and we got time for a response, and then we'll come back for a wrap up.
I think we just got to keep working hard to try to unify with other people, try to do more coalition building, try to do more coalition building against cultural and ethnic barriers, right? Against gender barriers as well, right? I think we need to just work harder at it. I think the circumstances and the conditions that we find ourselves in will probably push many of us to do some coalition building, right? Much as it pushed people 50, 60 years ago to search and to look for one another. And once they found one another, they were able to grab hold of something. So I think we have to follow the same type of trajectory today. It's going to be difficult because you have multiple distractions, unlike the situation that existed several decades ago. People talk about the objective conditions for revolutionary or radical change, but we can never discount the subjective conditions for that type of change as well. And so we have to look at how people see themselves, how we see one another, and what kind of gaps that we need to fill, how we can best fill that void. I agree. political education is very important within the Black community, outside of the Black community. Black people need to come to understand that we're not the only ones feeling this oppression, that we have never been the only ones who've been oppressed or exploited. Let's talk about the indigenous people. This is their land. It was violently taken from them, and they were massacred, murdered, and experienced genocide. So, and there are other people who live in this country who also have experienced all types of horrendous acts. How can we bridge the gap? How can we learn to come together? How can we move forward? But I gotta go back to my fundamental question that I started out with. The labor movement, if there is a labor movement, the unions, the labor leadership, the rank and file, you need to really look at how you see the national Black community. And that is going to determine how we all should best move forward.
I'm getting to wrap up soon. So again, thank you again, Brother Khalid Rahim. Gus.
I hate to interrupt, but we are at time, but for actually several minutes.
We're wrapping up. Give my opportunity, Gus, to respond, and then I'll give my 2 cents and we can go. Brother Gus, real quick.
Just wanted to let everyone know, if you wanted to learn more about the Ujima People's Progress Party, we're on Facebook and Instagram.
Oh, that was real quick. And I'll leave it with, I open with Martin Luther King. I'm gonna close with Martin Luther King. We must recognize that we can't solve our problems now until there's a radical redistribution of economic and political power. That means a revolution of values and other things. We must now see that the evils of racism, economic exploitation, and militarism are all tied together. You can't really get rid of one without getting rid of the others. The whole structure of American life must be changed. America is a hypocritical nation, and we must put our own house in order. And I think that is the best way to sum up Black liberation and fight for independent politics. Thank you to breaking the two-party system now, and we take it back to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Great discussion. So yeah, wow, this was a great discussion, and all of our panelists on this panel and all the others deserve a round of applause, even if we can't yet all see and hear each other, but certainly get my applause and half of everyone, I hope. So thank you all so much. Now we are about to move into our plenary session, which will be facilitated by Coral, with Mark Burrows from Railway Workers United serving as our timekeeper. However, first I need to turn this over to our tech producer, Alicia Quirk, to explain what we need to do to access the plenary, since it is separate from the webinar format that we have been in up until now. So I'm going to pass that over to you, Alicia, and take it away. Thank you.